Hi, welcome to Cherie's weight loss journey. I am getting out. It is like 9:40 p.m. and it's hot. It's still 88 degrees out. I'm telling you, once the heat starts radiating from the earth, it's kind of unbearable. The sun is setting, because like I said, it's damn near 9:45, right? So I decided, I'm going to get in the car and just take a ride and kind of see what's going on out here. Because it had been rumored to me that one of the ways, along with the joblessness, well, they also decided, that the economy doesn't warrant, having like a 24-hour city anymore. Okay? And that, I guess, the stores are open, but, they're not attracting business, but they're actually attracting criminals. Right? And so, I don't know, I guess they decided, they're not going to provide, services, in the middle of the night. That's what I'm going to take a look. I'm coming out to take a pulse to see, because it seemed like there's a lot of businesses that, are closing at 9 o'clock. Right? And that's what I want to see. I want to see it for myself. And by the time I go back home, I'll probably get a better idea, of which businesses, closed at 10. So we still have some stores open. Tom Thumbs is still open. 7-Eleven is still open. Taco Bell is still open. Raising Cane's is still open. Wingstop is still open. Subway is still open. Little Caesars is still open. Closed. Aldi's is closed. Walmart is still open. Looks like the bowling alley is still open. Chili's is closing. You can tell it's closing. Brahms, it has pints on sale again. And I'm definitely going through a craving phase of cheating on my diet. I woke up early today and I cooked some chicken, the chicken breast that I had left, seasoning in the refrigerator. I cooked that early this morning, and I had that with a spinach salad. So I had chicken spinach salad. It was very good. The seasoning soaked in and was so flavorful. I still have a small portion of that left over. But, you know, yesterday I came across some cheese puffs, some jalapeno cheese puffs, and I just been going crazy on those. Just way crazy. Just stuffing my face with those every chance I get. You know, just sitting back. You know, I tried calling the Quinault Housing Authority twice today. Tried calling them at 12:30 our time, which would be like 10:30 Pacific Coast. And then I also tried at 4:30, which would be like 2:30 Pacific Coast. All I was able to do was leave a message. And we'll see, you know, how they respond, or if they'll respond. Even when I had showed up there with my daughter, you know, it was hard to track somebody down, you know, and they were like sitting outside smoking cigarettes, and I was like, well, I guess, you know, they're, you know, on a break or something. But my daughter had an appointment, you know, so they say that they're open from I think 8 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 or something like that. And I don't know about their, you know, work ethics. Yeah, nobody knows about their work ethics. You know, because it's laid back, I'm sure. Yeah. And on one hand, you know, that's the type of lifestyle that, you know, it can be admired. It can be admired. But, you know, on the other hand, you know, don't like to just be left hanging. You know, they don't like to just be left hanging. Then again, it could be, you know, an indicator that, you know, trying to go and live up there is really not, you know, the option that I want to take, especially at this time of the year. But I think this time of the year would be pretty decent. You know, it doesn't get cold like it does here in Texas. Here in Texas, the summers are extreme hot, and then the winters are extreme cold, and then, you know, incremental weather in between, for sure. You know, but, you know, I'm definitely, you know, trying to go where I feel like I'm guided. And, you know, like I said, even yesterday, you know, they claimed that they were hiring. They had a position for a cashier. One position open for a cashier. Most of the people that they had working in Home Depot were either the elderly or the very young. And yet there was more. There seemed like there was more employees in the store more than actual customers. And I'm like, how, you know what happens when, that happens. When that happens, then employees have to do like make busy work, or at least move around and run away from people telling you to do, the make busy work. Because, the make busy work, usually involves, doing stuff that's not in your description. It's not in your job description. That's that part where it says do other tasks as needed. And even though it's not necessarily as needed, in the sense that you would think, oh, they need you to do something important, it's like, no, we're not going to pay you to stand around. That's it. That's why so many people play hide and seek on the job. Yeah. But today has went by so fast. It's like before I knew it, it's like time to go back to bed, and I'm not ready to go back to bed because it's too hot. So interesting enough, I've been able to regulate my body, not to get too hot, during the hottest part of the day. But then come evening time, I guess, it's harder for me to do it. Right? I'm expecting cooler weather, and it dropped down to 86 degrees. So today, I posted how, Obama during his presidency, he decided to commingle, the retirement funds with the disability funds, because the disability funds was depleted. And then now that they had, supplemented those funds, you best believe a lot of people was jumping on disability, especially, to survive the pandemic. Because everybody that was asking for aid, they were saying, well, maybe you should try getting on disability. Like a mental disability or something like that. Which is something I was like, yeah, with the new Social Security Administration, you can expect some reforms. You can expect some people who were paid who didn't qualify, And then I would have expected that once they, retrieved back that money, because it happened on a massive scale, that they would use that money to justify, providing, the retirees, a cost of living increase. Will they? I don't know. And I'm thoroughly disgusted that, they treat, senior citizens like terminally disabled citizens, because, they're elderly and, they're not projected they can't project how long they're going to live, so they want to write them off. They just want to write them off and tell them, survive however you can. And that's not what Social Security was designed to do. So that was on my mind. And also like the healthcare situation that Obama did, where Obama made it mandatory, for people to carry health care, and then also, authorized, the transgender surgery and medication. Historically, Obama, for being the first president, I can say that his resume really sucks. It really sucks. In further, causing our society to deteriorate, right? So then, as I'm sitting up there contemplating our society deteriorating, on my algorithm, I start getting these, surviving, a societal collapse. And I'm like, oh, damn. Right? So now they're going to, they're advising, people who have money, don't go around here looking like you have money, don't have, your homes and your lawns and everything, manicured and, and it was just like, well, dang, that defeats the whole purpose, of trying, to live, successfully. You want your home to look, plush and manicured and well maintained, and but because our society had been coddled to the point where now they're just outright rioting and lashing out at people who are better off than they are, basically suspecting that most people, got what they had received, through manipulative devices. And it makes sense. That would be the karma. If you acquired wealth, your karma is that, your wealth will, run from you like sand in your hands, So, and this is showing up, all over our planet where, corrupt leaders, had used, devices, to promote, slavery through, rigid controls, and thinking that, they can just usher people into these, slave mentalities, and yet people are like, no, they don't want to be a slave, you know, and because slave with no rights, slave with no life, slave with lives their life basically on automatic and has no joy, just a routine, where people are scrambling around to try to find food banks and food pantries and further going into post-war devices of buying food that isn't healthy but will provide calories. While there are other people on the other hand who believe that they have stability, that they are on the good side of the tracks, and it's not going to affect them. But every day we hear more and more people talking about how they're getting laid off, how their job no longer exists, how even the money that they have is not it's not stretching enough to sustain themselves. And then we had the other people who are like having to do 5, 6, 7 jobs, different streams of income. And nobody's happy. And then, you have some people who were like, okay, well, I'm going to escape the world, and just live in my vehicle. And they had the audacity to want to hurt those people under the guise that, of course, hardened criminals are going to shield themselves using those, homeless people and hiding among them. Like, when I've seen, some people on YouTube talking about, they've been doing like van life or vehicle life for 9 or 10 years. Right? That's well before the whole pandemic. And then you have other people, who suffered because of the pandemic, still not able to recuperate from the pandemic because, they've gotten so far, into financial debt. And even myself, when I got laid off right before the pandemic, went into lockdown, I had to, go on unemployment because there was a lockdown, right? And I haven't been able to recoup from that at all, right? And so you can best believe, people, are becoming very, hostile, and I can feel it in the air. I can feel it in the air that people are getting so hostile And you can see, it's like every week somebody else snaps, and there's a mass shooting somewhere, that they just snap. So, and yet, I can state over and over, hey, this will pass, don't make permanent decisions. Don't do permanent actions. Don't, because it's going to pass, and you'll look back, and you'll be caught up, because that's what a lot of people had did even during the pandemic. During the pandemic, a lot of people made some horrible decisions. And in the process of making these horrible decisions, they just, now are caught up, right? The people who are taking the PPP loans fraudulently, the people who have been scamming, are starting to get caught years after they thought that they had got away with it. But they had been, under investigation, and, they were, still accumulating evidence against them, and, seeing how wide, of a net they need to catch all of the participants involved. And then you had those, who went to the illicit business practices, who seemed like, it should be obvious that they would be the easiest ones to take down. But, our leaders are afraid to take them down because, they were seen in company with these same very, diabolical people. And they don't want to go down with them. So it's like now we're back at square one, where nothing gets resolved, nothing is being done, and promises aren't kept, to good, decent people. It just seems like, the only promises that are being kept are to the wicked people. And I don't know if it's out of fear or if it's out of some kind of bribery or what, But that's not gonna matter. It's not gonna matter, because even though you'll have people out here saying that, well, this is the way it's been, and this is the way, it's always been done, and, and this is how it's going to be, realistically, that's not true. Right? Every so-called great nation that became great using, corruption and tyranny, they fell from within, even if they never got conquered. They will fall from within. And that's just plain karma. Plain and simple karma. Consequences of our actions. So I ended up coming across this woman on my algorithm from British Columbia, and you know, she had thoroughly, you know, discussed the programs and stuff that they have for all of these people, all of these dysfunctional people, the programs that they had, you know, to get these people off of the streets and to try to get these people help, right? But she doesn't fall into any of those. First of all, she's not a senior. You know, second of all, she's not a drug addict. She's not mentally ill, you know, and she was describing how she doesn't fall into this whole list of programs that they have out there for people, but she doesn't qualify for any of these programs. And she's just you know, a single woman, you know, unemployed, you know, trying to survive. And you know, she first was starting to live in her car, then she was able to, you know, get a living expense that they had, I guess a disability type of expense. I can't remember what she said it was, but they awarded her like $500 a month, and she couldn't live off of anywhere for $500 a month. So what she decided to do was to buy herself a van. And you know, and she's just horrified that, you know, she's now coming across so many places that, you know, it's just so unsafe for her, you know, to park at, because, you know, they've changed the zoning of BML land, and also not just BML land, but, you know, like overnight parking is being outlawed. And she was saying that, you know, the only places where, you know, they haven't really outlawed it was out like in very rural areas. And, you know, and she was saying that she just didn't feel safe. And I can understand that, because, you know, up in BC, you get out there in the rural areas, you know, you are definitely in, you know, not you don't have to just worry about the animals. You don't have to just worry about the animals. And damn, even Wanderlust, you know, she had a trouble while she was, you know, stealth camping overnight, and they stole the emblem off of her Cadillac. And you know, and she was just heartbroken, because she's like, now my vehicle looks like a piece of junk, you know, without the Cadillac emblem on the front. And then another group, you know, was camping, and they had, you know, because when you're out there camping in the wilderness, you know, you have to put your food hopefully downwind of your location, and your food and your garbage and stuff like that, you know, it all has to be away from you so that, you know, bears or coyotes or, you know, whatever won't come and, you know, look for food and, you know, attack you. And there was this group, these campers, you know, they had woke up to, you know, their food actually being stolen. Yeah. So on one hand, you know, they were probably happy that, you know, they remembered, you know, to put the food like 300 feet away from them. But at the same time, you know, I'm sure, you know, there was a spark of fear in their soul that said, you know, this could have went completely different. So we can't just assume that it's going to be like just, you know, just horrible people out there, but it also can be, you know, animals, you know, in nature, you know, just doing their thing, you know. And yet, you know, the problem still exists, that even in shelters, these people don't feel safe. Even in shelters, you know, I had followed one person who was homeless, and they were not able to get into a bed. They couldn't claim a bed because it's not a room or anything like that. It's just a cot. They weren't able to claim a bed, you know, until after 3 p.m. And then after a certain time, they just shut the doors. That's it. Right? And I can't help but to wonder, why do we have all of these churches around that, you know, and they're big, beautiful churches, you know, and, you know, they have all of these empty rooms, and like, I'm looking at this big, beautiful church right there to take up almost, you know, a whole block, you know, that should be, you know, compelled, you know, to try to turn that into something functional to really help the people. And by helping the people, you're also helping the country. So I don't know. I really don't know. And then we still have this, you know, these two warring opposites. You know, we have the tech world, you know, fighting against the liberal arts people. We have the men fighting the women, you know, and it's just like, you know, it just doesn't end. And the sad part about it is we have children that are growing up with all of this going on around them, whether they understand it or not, they feel it. They feel the tension, they feel the stress, they feel the anxiety. That's what they will understand. You know, they'll also understand, you know, like if they have to do like these drills, you know, in preparation for a societal collapse, you know, where they have to, you know, spend time being quiet, where they have to do these drills, you know, on what to do if, you know, if there's a home invasion or you know, and stuff like that. You know, that's stuff that we really did. I know I didn't have to grow up in. But this is what, you know, this is what's being advocated, you know, to our children today. And sadly enough, a lot of them who aren't listening, you know, they may end up, you know, as a victim on an Amber Alert. So now we're at a point where, you know, the women are saying, you know, if you're gonna make life this complicated, you know, you don't have to worry about me being a baby mama. You can have custody of the children, or the children can go to the state. It's not worth it. It is just not worth the squeeze. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. Damn, there's something going on up here. They done blocked the road off. A car accident. Yeah, look at that. Ooh-wee. That is crazy what happened there. See, and that's another reason why, you know, I don't like to get out and, you know, even for a drive, because of the recklessness of of the people around in our society. Airbags were deployed and stuff. You know them airbags, they'll knock your ass out unconscious. So yeah, I mean, on one hand, you know, you could say, you know, well, it was inevitable that this was going to happen, right? But then on the other hand, it's like, you know, the only reason why it's inevitable that it was going to happen was because people didn't want to change. You know, They can go, they can travel anywhere on the planet, and they will see how other countries do not allow the type of freedom that has been allowed in America. And now America is now starting to take away, our freedoms. That's what I see. And that's what they ultimately see too. But then, when every time the Democrats get into power, it looks like chaos. And it looks like we're all being run by some demonic force, where anything goes that's just horrific and heathenistic. And I'm not, like a religious person. I'm a spiritual person. To me, religion is just the gateway to spirituality. If people are stuck in religion and they don't advance to spirituality, they have arrested development. When you get involved in religion, you're supposed to keep seeking the truth about, who you are and why you're here on this planet. But most people, they love to be on that hamster wheel of just like first grade religion. And that's usually what it is. Because religion is supposed to teach you about faith. It's supposed to teach you about honor. It's supposed to teach you about love. It's supposed to teach you about discipline. And they're just stuck on that hamster wheel of recycling over and over, transgressions and repentance, transgressions and repentance, transgression and repentance, and they never elevate into spirituality. And yet they have the audacity to think that they are spiritual. And a lot of them, because they don't advance into spirituality, they think it's not real. It's just some messed up, phony thing that was put down on human beings, to control them. And true enough, there are parasites out here that will use every device that was created, every system that was created to steal from people. Right? It doesn't matter what it is. Just like, you name it, you bring it up, and I will tell you both sides of the coin, where you'll have certain people, who are doing this, even like when it comes to van life, you'll have certain people who are doing this out of necessity, good, decent people. But then you'll also have people out here who will use that as a means to, to walk this earth like a ghost, just so they could do wicked shit. And use van life as a cover-up, off-grid. So now they don't want to have off-grid situations where criminals can build a hideaway there. just like the safety net for single women with children, mainly single women with children, but there could be single men with children. The housing program, wicked people decided that they were going to, control these women with children and use them as a shield and take up refuge where they can exist and not be, held accountable, responsible, or or even viable for their own personal existence. In every situation, you have to look at, the pros and the cons. You have to. If you can't do that basic understanding, and for everything that, every system or every program or whatever, that was meant for good, you have all of these other people that's trying to manipulate it and use it as a means to get over. And I know this. I know people that are like that. I know people that I love, dearly, where every time they open up their mouth, I have to shake my head thinking that, why? Why do you feel like, you just need to get over and that you're slicker than a can of oil? And then, like I said, you'll have these people pretending like, they're good people. But I mean, all right, so you don't want the homeless in your buildings, but why can't you set up a safe parking space? Because most churches have a lot of parking space. Set up an outdoor toilet. I know because of the homeless situation, I would hate to be a membership of a gym when I know that there are people who are homeless, that would just come and use the facilities. Nasty as hell. Nasty as hell. Look at that. It is 10:30 at night on a Tuesday, and they have a whole field lit up where men can come and play soccer, football. They can come and play football. They got the construction people out here working in at nighttime with lights because it's too damn hot. It's just too damn hot during the day. See? And there was some back there. But they're down out here working, saying, hell, they'd rather work at night than the people, go out here and have a heat stroke. It's 84 degrees. At least it's cooled down a little bit. And there's less traffic. So the tradespeople, at least they have a job at nighttime. So I went online and I was looking for some courses on how to get certified in first aid and CPR, and it looks like it would cost me anywhere from like $65 to $75 to get certification. And I'm like, well, damn. Well, damn. Definitely would be worth the cost, but do I have that kind of money to spare?